there are some incredibly big changes being made, especially in the municipal system. But it's going to affect everybody.
Okay.
Hopefully it will be very good.
Do you still think that Trump may try to bankrupt the territorial?
I think it's already bankrupt. I think both the municipal and the territorial are now bankrupt.
It sure seems like it to me.
Well, and it it's one of those which came first, chicken or egg type things, where did the war in the Middle East come first, or did the extreme need to make money come first? You know, I was looking at a okay, this is what President Trump put out as a memo just a couple of hours ago. And this was from one of his MAGA support sites. And it's basically a tweet from Donald Trump, supposedly saying, "Congratulations to everyone. It has been fully agreed by and between Israel and Iran that there will be a complete and total ceasefire, in parentheses, in approximately 6 hours from now, when Israel and Iran have wound down and completed their progress final missions for 12 hours, at which point the war will be considered ended. Officially, Iran will start the ceasefire, and upon the 12th hour, Israel will start the ceasefire, and upon the 24th hour, an official end to the 12-day war will be saluted by the world. During each ceasefire, the other side will remain peaceful and respectful. On the assumption that everything works as it should, which it will, I would like to congratulate both countries, Israel and Iran, on having the stamina, courage, and intelligence to end what should be called the 12-day war. This was a war that could have gone on for years and destroyed the entire Middle East, but didn't, and never will. God bless Israel, God bless Iran, God bless the whole Middle East, God bless the United States of America, and God bless the world. Donald J. Trump, President of the United States of America, and that is in all caps.
Wow. Interesting.
Well, they basically pulled a Hiroshima on Iran, a Pearl Harbor and a Hiroshima. First, they did the Pearl Harbor with their sneak attack on their air defense capability. And then they turned around and they unleashed these humongous 30,000-pound bombs these bunker busters, and they completely took out not only the nuclear research facilities, but according to what I just heard of before I came on, they also took out their nuclear power program, where they were, building a reactor. So they basically went in and attacked a sovereign country and set up a situation where everyone could agree it was getting senseless.
As if it wasn't already?
Right. I just want to point out to everybody, especially all you Israel fans out there, that in the past 2 years, Israel has attacked Yemen, Syria, Iraq, Lebanon, and Iran, all without any great provocation. It's enough to make me ask, who's the real terrorist here, right? Who just goes around attacking other sovereign nations as if it didn't matter? As if you had some sort of special God-given right to go trample on your neighbors and ruin their property and kill them. This is something screw loose in the Israeli government and in the direction of the State of Israel Incorporated. Okay, these guys are nuts. And they desperately need a regime change in Israel to, get rid of this apartheid and this violence and this fear and this horrible attitude toward everyone who isn't an Israeli. And I was looking today at some statistics which seem to say to me that the Mossad is in competition with the British MI6 to be the intelligence and enforcers. And so I'm wondering how that's being parlayed. Anyway, just an observation that the Mossad has taken over a lot of the functions that MI6 used to do.
As if the world can't get any more crazier.
Yeah, well, and then we have all sorts of other things going on that are just, amazing. The argument has been the concept of indigenous versus non-indigenous people, and what it should be is an argument between what is actual factual living people and non-living persons. Okay, that's the one we need to get. That's the difference we need to understand, that all living people have the same rights, the same what can you say, the same essence. It doesn't really matter if your skin is white or black. And if you're a black man who grew up in Savannah, Georgia is your home just as much as a black man growing up in Nigeria. You become attached to the land and soil of your birth. And that's why in this country, we consider everybody American. It doesn't matter which state you were born on, you're still an American. And yet within that state, you love your state, you love your home, you love your little town. So I think that there's some thinking about those subjects that needs to be done too. It's not that the indigenous are indigenous in any truthful sense, because everybody's indigenous to wherever they grew up. I mean, I had this big argument with Chief Vasthorst not too long ago, and I basically observed, sure, I'm a German back several generations, and yeah, take a look at this mug, this is a little German girl, right? However, every atom of every cell that's in my body came from this country. It came specifically from Wisconsin. How can you say I'm not indigenous? You're just making up this arbitrary definition and label and starting another war that doesn't have to be, because we're all here, we're all alive, we're all from the same place, we're all here as living people, and that's what counts. All the rest of this stuff should go right out the window.
Yeah, just more of trying to create separation when there really is none.
Right. A divide and conquer strategy at the very beginning of things. And we need to nip it in the bud. 400 million of us need to stand up and say, hey, we're indigenous.
Exactly.
If I'm not indigenous to this country, tell me where all the atoms of my body and brain come from. Where else was I, or my mother? Let's prove that I'm not indigenous to this country, and really, get down to the brass tacks of what that means, and how stupid this really is. It's not an argument that anybody should be having, and it's not something that anyone should base their claims upon. What our claim should be based on the fact that we're living people and this is where we were born and raised and where we have our being. Nothing else. So
Right.
anyway, there are all sorts of discussions and things going on right now that some of them are divisive. Some of them are long overdue and they are very unifying and very refreshing. You're going to see some really bizarre things coming forward from the CIA. All those intelligence organizations have had, quote unquote, multiple narratives prepared for years in advance that they're going to try to sell people, you know. They're going to try to tell you that this is true and that that is true and that something that's diametrically different is true. And you're going to have to use your own Shinola sensors to make any sense of it at all. And you're going to have to learn to do what I have done so successfully for so many years, is to take in information for what it's worth. You know, if it can't be readily demonstrated in the public record, if it can't readily be observed in actual reality, well then, you know, maybe it's worth, the thought, you know, maybe it was worth thinking about for, you know, a few seconds or a couple of minutes. But, you know, you hold those sorts of things in abeyance. You kind of take it in and you set it aside and you think, well, okay, well, I heard that. And does it connect to any of the other dots? And if so, well, you know, is there a strong enough connection to other parts and pieces to make this a credible claim or a credible accusation or a credible bit of reliable information or not? And, you know, we all have to do that kind of sifting and sieving process in order to make it work, to make this world work. We all have to do that. And I just encourage everybody, you know, don't believe everything, you know, so innocently and don't be so gullible. If, you know, someone tells you, you have to do this, it should be your immediate question, why and who says and who are you? You know, just so that you don't just become a victim of these Sharpies. And I just call them Sharpies because they, you know, they've got an angle, they know what their angle is and they're working it against you, right? So they walk up to you and they say, hey, you're 18. Why aren't you signed up with the Selective Service? You have to sign up with the Selective Service. No, you don't. No, you absolutely do not have to sign up with the Selective Service. And the same thing with the draft. Hey, you're 18. We're drafting you to serve. Oh, no, you're not. You don't have to be subject to a draft. It's all bullshit. And if you have your ears up and your eyes open and you're thinking, the moment that somebody tries to shove something like that down your throat, you're going to go, oh, I thought that press ganging was outlawed back in, what was it? 1792? Oh, and I'm sorry. You must have mistaken me for someone else.
I don't work at Wendy's.
I'm not a British territorial. I'm very sorry that you mistook me for someone else or something else. But whatever it is, no, I don't have to serve you. And no, I don't have to sign up for selective service. And no, I don't have to go over and fight a war just because you say so. And they do try to, they put a bum's rush on all the young kids coming out of high school. They try to wheedle and whine and coerce and you know, puff themselves up, great authority figures. Yes, of course, young men, you have to sign up for the draft. And yes, you have to sign up for the selective service. The hell you beller, no, I don't. And they'll keep coming. They'll keep calling. They'll keep sending you threatening letters. But no, you don't have to consent. So don't. Eventually they give up. They're like bill collectors, you know. After a while, they just go, can't get blood out of that turnip.
It's just another fishing expedition.
Exactly.
Yep.
And I'm going after the IRS with hammer, tongs, and nails.
Good.
45,000 IRS agents hit the streets today with pink slips.
Woohoo!
Now we're going to get rid of another 45,000.
Woohoo!
And then we're going to get rid of another 45,000.
Woohoo!
And then we're going to shut the damn doors. Because there isn't a damn thing anywhere that says a bank has any ability to levy taxation. So please join me. We're going to have fun. We're going to get rid of the IRS. We're going to get control of our own military. We're going to take back our land and our soil. And we're going to have a country that makes sense again, where the people actually are in charge. And everybody's going to be heartily encouraged with a whole new curriculum that they never knew about their own history. And they're going to be encouraged to participate in a government of, for, and by the people. And we're not going to fall victim to the wiles of Rome.
Never again.
It was really funny today. I was thinking about, the stuff that I explained to the World Court. The irony is that the Cherusci, or Cherusi, if you want to say it that way, have taken a lot, inherited a lot from the Roman Stoic philosophers.
Huh.
So ironically, we owe a lot to the Romans who were Stoics.
Huh.
Philosophically, it's a very Stoic lifestyle. It's a very Stoic way of thinking, evaluating things. So yeah, we owe a lot to the Roman Stoics, and yet we've been at loggerheads with much of what the practical implementation of Roman policy has been for the better part of 2,000 years.
Right. So are you saying, I wanted to ask you about that specifically. The Stoics were, that was the early part of Rome. And then what ended up happening is they adopted that military model and then started stealing land and.
Yep.
Okay.
Becoming robbers and thieves instead of being honorable men.
Right.
And that's where we divided from them. We didn't have any big problem with the Romans. We got along just fine with the Roman Republic. But then they were acting as honorable men. They were acting as, good neighbors and good trading partners. And so there was no problem with Rome in its early days. It was only after the militarization of Rome that, and they began attacking and sacking and doing things that were damaging to their neighbors, that the issues arose. And the interesting thing is that as these different issues arose, they became consolidated in principles and in ideas that are now a part of the American government. And in that 12-page document that you have there, you'll see that certain things are in boldface. And within the historical narrative, you can see exactly where things like innocent until proven guilty and the right to keep and bear arms, and the universal right to your own conscience and religious belief. All those things arose out of the long experience of the Germanic tribal groups that, well, and French too, because the Germans settled in Normandy, resulted in these principles, these different things that we take for granted today were not dreamed of in the days of the Roman Empire, except by these German tribesmen who had fought with the Romans and continued to fight with the Romans and have always fought with the Romans over these things. You know, the Romans that you see today and the kind of government that they try to impose upon you is the same kind of Roman Empire government that they tried to impose in 9 AD when the Cherusci first rose up and clobbered them in the Teutoburg Forest. And so guerrilla warfare, you know, really tactical guerrilla warfare was born in the Battle of Teutoburg Forest in 9 AD, and it was deployed again in the Revolution. You know, people talk about the kind of, you know, an American behind every gate and fence post. They talk about that in terms of it being some sort of innovation, some evil innovation of war that took place in the Revolutionary War here in America. Hell no. No, the first time that was really deployed and used to great effect was in the Battle of Teutoburg Forest, where guerrillas were organized and they took on the Roman legions.
Yeah, that was an absolutely fascinating piece of history, and I encourage everyone on this webinar to print it out and read it. It was really, really interesting, and it's so amazing that you have this at your fingertips, that you have the memory, you have the history, you have all of that at the ready, and you're able to just write up a 12-page document and ship it off to the world court, you know? That's amazing.
Well, you know, I guess in a way it is. You know, I don't particularly take any credit for myself. I was given opportunities. I met wonderful people. I went places that sometimes I shouldn't have gone, but I went and I learned from the experiences and the things that I saw and the people I talked to. And, you know, I recommend that kind of a curiosity and a zest for life to anybody, because life is what's really ultimately valuable. And so tying those things together, the concept of life and value, to start out with the ultimate value, the life that we have, and how precious that really is, and make good use of it. Enjoy it. Get out there and pursue the things that matter according to the light you see. I started out as a mathematician. I found that to be very comforting. I didn't have to deal with the hurly-burly of the world. I didn't have to deal with other people very much. You know, it was a quiet and satisfying, and at the end of the day, a fulfilling pursuit, because you either had the answer or you had another question. And it was not anything combative. So, you know, I was all set up to be a nice, quiet little academic person. I wasn't, you know, I'm small. I'm not particularly physically adept. I have horrible eye-hand coordination, for example. Could never play ball. Lots of things that indicated I was going to be a quiet, scholarly little person, okay? Little did I know that I would get thrown into the hurly-burly of history and law and religion and, God forbid, banking. But, you know, life is what happens. Well, God has other plans. You know?
Happens
Just,
along the way.
you know, You start out and you're just going to go to Mississippi, right? You're just going to walk on down and take in a football game, right? No, you wind up in California doing something totally different. Heck, you may wind up in Guadalajara doing something totally different. You have no idea where you're going to go when you start this life or what the journey's going to be. And I just remind young people that, you know, Shakespeare knew his stuff. There is a destiny that hews our lives and makes us what we are and puts us in places we never expected to be, doing things we never expected. It rough hews our lives, and we only get to enjoy the details, like what you're going to have among several different dinner choices tonight, okay? And just thank God that you've got the different dinner choices, right?
Yes, for sure.
So
Uh, well, yeah, who knew? But thank you for being able to pull something off like that. And thank you for, of course, all of your many, 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 many efforts.
and you know, just make it an effort a day, whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
I don't care if it's, you know, talking for 5 minutes with your kids about the concept of religious freedom and why it's important for people to have the freedom of their conscience and their belief. You know, I don't care if it's, you know, talking to your grandfather about getting his land properly um, recorded instead of just registered, and actually researching and claiming his land patent and grant underlying it. You know, whatever it is, whatever your bent is, whatever you're inspired to do, just try to make one effort a day. Okay. I usually get up and by noon, I've got a dozen different things that I've done to try to advance our position and our cause and to get the government on its feet. Okay. To get the people safe, to, you know, to make this work. Okay. And I really think that you all can do far more than you imagine if you simply start doing it.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I believe that for two reasons. Number one, my own experience. And number two, I observe how hard the vermin try to keep us paralyzed.
Yes, they do.
They try to confuse us so that we feel like we don't know what we should do. They feed us hopium, hoping that some savior is going to come and make it all right.
Right?
They skew the news toward things that are useless, hopeless, and you know, totally valueless, so that we are deflected onto all these emotional topics surrounding death and sex and death and death and sex. That's, you know, that's their trade, is to peddle all these tales that really don't have anything to do with you or your life. They don't enrich you in some way, really. They're, you know, they're things that you can't do anything about, right? So you're left looking at the news and thinking, why is this news and why does it matter to me? Oh, it doesn't, does it? And then you think, and yet I hear all these people, they're all over the country and they're all glued to their television set watching Dan Rather or, you know, whatever. I'm grateful that that's no longer the case. I'm grateful that more and more news services have sprung up, but then you have the same problem. You don't know which ones are telling the truth, which ones are purposefully lying and providing disinformation. You know, there's just no end to the nonsense and the false vibes and the false information, and some of it's deliberate and some of it's innocent, but it's still disinformation. And you know, picking through all that is really hard. And I'm just thinking about our friend Edgar Allan Poe sitting there in the years immediately after all this started, saying, you know, don't believe anything you hear and only half of what you see.
Right? I was just thinking about that like 10 minutes ago.
Yeah, and it's really true.
It's
You
true.
have to have your Chinola sensor set on permanent high and just go through life um, looking at things skeptically, because, I'm not saying be cynical. I'm not saying be uh, hopeless or anything like that. I'm just saying that everything that we're presented with requires a lot of more discernment than what we commonly give things.
Well, we've all seen how much the indoctrination has affected all of us in our assemblies. And, it's really nice to be around your fellow assemblymen and women, because they're going to gently remind you when you do fall into indoctrination. And it's so easy.
It is, it is. And you're right. We are forming a cadre of enlightened and enlivened people who are thinking with their own brains and sorting through things. They are self-governing, okay? And maybe for some people, it's the first time in their life that they've undertaken that challenge to really know who they are and really know what they value and why they value it, and how they came to this place in time and space, and why they're here, and what they need to do, all these things. And it's all very important. And it's all very difficult in some respects. We shouldn't expect that self-knowledge and self-governance are going to be easy.
Not the first generation.
No, and I think that it's always okay. Remember that in Native tradition, there is this time when a young man goes off on his quest. He goes off all by himself, and he's looking for who he really is. And he encounters dreams, he encounters, animals, he encounters things that are like clues. And he finally comes to a settled understanding of who he is by questing for it, by experiencing things, and by being alert to the information that is coming back to him from the world around him. And so he becomes informed about who he is and what he believes, and what he values and what his symbols are, and he comes back a man. Now, I don't know if this is something that's viable for everyone, but I do know it's a journey we all need to take at whatever age.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, any other heads ups about some of the changes that are coming from the municipal and that type of thing?
Well, I believe that there are certain elements of government that are structuring themselves because they realize that they've been corrupt and they haven't gotten the job done, and that the world is a hash because of them. Okay, and they're, at least some of them, realize that, and they're sorry, and they're admitting that, yeah, we screwed up, and so they're coming forward to try to help, and that's very encouraging.
Wow. Okay.
So I think that's very good. We are getting more traction in terms of making our public servants hear us and be accountable. Of course, it can't come fast enough because it's been so deeply ingrained, and it's been operating in such a misguided and wrong-headed way for so long that we're still having a lot of friction. And there's still a lot of friction from the political system, because there are people out here who have grown up in the political system, and they just think that's the way it has to be. And that, you would think from talking to them that Republicans and Democrats had always existed. And that's not true at all. They can't tell the difference between a political party and a government. They can't tell the difference between a private corporate election and a public election. They can't conceive the difference between a private corporation and a public corporation. And so starting out from those sorts of profound ignorances can lead to people making equally profoundly wrong assumptions about how things work and why they work that way. And unless you keep your head up and keep looking and searching, then it's unlikely that you will ever find what it is that you need.
Yeah, well, that's why the assemblies are here, because we're going to be doing outreach and we're going to come looking for you.
And you're going to keep on learning. I mean,
Yes.
each and every one of you now has an education about the history of the world and about the workings of things like banking and money and whatnot that you couldn't buy at the finest university in this country.
Not even close. And there's still the issue that most attorneys don't even know law or where it comes from.
Right. So next time you feel dumb, just remember the Bar Association, hopefully in your rear view mirror.
Yeah, I think we still may need to do some deportations, but
Forget deporting all the Mexicans and Hondurans, just deport the Bar
for the
Association.
attorneys, yeah. Get rid
Deport
of
the Bar
them.
Association back to England.
We need the Mexicans. Don't need the attorneys.
Yeah, the Mexicans are pretty much, they're a plus. You know what I mean?
Totally, totally. I'd rather
So-
have a Mexican sit next to me than an attorney any day.